Hello and welcome to SDAQ&A with my nice little mellow countdowner there. My special guest today is Brendan Valiant. Good to have you here, Brendan.
Good to be here.
This is your third time, is it, or second time?
I think I also made a brief appearance on something else, so it might be fourth.
Yeah, if we count Voice Life Fellowship as well, maybe. I'm not sure. But
No, there
either
was
way.
one that you got me in. You were doing
Oh, yes, a group
22.
thing.
You were doing an
That's right.
October 22, and I was in my car. I messaged you, and you said, "Can you make it?" And so I drove home quickly.
Yes, that's right. That's right. It's coming up to October 22 again, so we'll have to do
Yes.
something special. Welcome, everybody. We've got Moto Sapiens watching, and he's saying, "G'day, everybody." We've also got With Girded Sword, and he's saying, "Hi to Moto Sapien." I love that.
That was me.
That was you. Oh, I didn't realize that was your handle there.
Yes.
And Rochelle, hi, I'm on time today. It's good to have you here, Rochelle. I think you kind of only stumbled across us a little while back. And we've got Rick, of course, saying, hi, everyone, grace and peace to you. And there's a question here, I think. Is there somewhere you can post the topic guest ahead of time? Yes, very good question. I have learned how to do that now on YouTube and have done for the last 2 interviews, but couldn't work it out again this week. I've got to write down the steps. So I will make sure I get that for you, Rochelle, next time. And we've got Nat tuning in. And Hal has made it after all. Now, we've got, good to have you here, Hal. Tomorrow, just a quick plug there, Brendan, before we kick off our conversation today on being disfellowshipped. From disfellowship to discipleship. I like that. Angela's here. Hi, Angela. Sharon also. Hi from Adelaide. Love all the little emojis. And Angela's back from her holiday in Hawaii. So welcome, everybody. Good to have you here. Quick plug, tomorrow at exactly this time, Clinton Baldwin will be my guest. And he is going to be, well, I'm not even sure what we're going to talk about. But he is on the program, and I know that everyone will enjoy that. And also, one last quick plug for all things SDA Q&A here. Thank you, everyone, for supporting the channel. The last month, I've been raising money to get validated or verified, I think it is, on Twitter. We were going live there every week, but we couldn't because it costs quite a bit to be, you pay your validation for a year and verified or whatever it is. So we got enough money for that. We've had enough money to host the website, SDA Q&A website, which is up and running. I'll bring the link a bit later for that as well. And also our amazing gospel programs that hopefully are going to happen every Friday. It's like SDA Q&A Church. Come and join us. I wanted to have a platform called StreamYard where I'm going to give to all those that are my invited presenters, and they will be able to just log in, put up their own buttons and numbers, and also use it in Voice Life Fellowship, because a number of people do live programs each week there. And I want to them to be able to just, if I'm there having to log them in all the time, it's very time consuming. So this way people can pick their time slot, in they go, and do their program. So thank you, everyone, for supporting me. If you'd like to make a donation, the QR code is there, and you can just simply scan that, and that really helps the channel. Or you can go, I think that link actually takes you to PayPal, but here's the link if you can't scan the QR code, paypal.me/Peter Dixon Music. So everyone, my special guest today is Brendan Valiant. And look, he went through some pretty, would you say, dark night of the soul times with regarding being disfellowshipped. And one thing I've admired of many things, Brendan, about you is that you are a dust yourself off, get back up again, and keep on moving kind of person. And you always take the positive stance and go in the positive direction. And but you also acknowledge the stuff that's not been great, because unless you can talk about that and be brave and bold to share those darker times, in some ways it kind of invalidates your whole process. I think it's great that people can go, look, I came from here, this is what happened, here is where I am now.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that positive slant that you take on things. And a lot of people, if they've been disfellowship, they don't want to talk about it, and they often just run away and hide. You have started your own, would you call it a church or a movement or a tribe or whatever, the border church there up between New South Wales and Queensland? We'll come.
Yeah, it was an accident. That was an accident. I mean, you talk about, the positivity. I wasn't always positive. I suffered from a deep depression in my teenage years, in my early 20s, very deep and quite dark, even to the
Wow.
point of seeking self-harm. And it was, it was through therapy and through medication for a period of time, but that I was able to overcome. And that actually led me to work in mental health up until I became an accidental pastor. Um, so it could have been a very different story what I went through if I hadn't become resilient, if I hadn't learned resilience. Just while we've just before we start, I wanted to. I'm also got my phone on silent, but looking at the Facebook comments, and I just want to say hi to Stephen Beagles, Bishop Beagles here.
Yes.
He says, and also to Debbie, who says that I look like a prophet. Well, it's probably the beard, but yes, my
If we
barber does say my barber does say it's the second best beard that he works on. So.
if we could put my hair over your beard, or we
Then
could
it might be,
split a
yes.
change, we'd have a very interesting. I'm glad you reminded me about the Facebook group, because
Yeah.
yes, I've now switched on the comments so I can see them too. So that's great.
Yeah. So I mean, any rent in relationship is difficult, and it is understandable that a lot of people will just go and bury themselves and shy away from it, because relationship problems is it's one of the leading causes of depression. And whether it's like divorce between a married couple or breakup of a partnership is painful. A church adds another dimension because there's more relationships involved, and so you're not just losing necessarily one person. You can be losing a whole family, and that's what it was. That's what it did feel like when I went through that. As disfellowship, I actually prefer to call it dismemberment, because it's an ugly process, and it deserves to be called by something that signifies that. Disfellowship is a very sanitized way of. It's more like a divorce. It's messy and problematic. And if you don't cling on to Jesus, if you don't cling on to the people who are supportive of you in that process, it can lead to some, like you say, some dark times of the soul.
Yeah. I think though, and even you saying about your experience with depression and how bad it got, you can't ever be of service to someone else unless you've been through that darkness, if that makes any sense. I remember speaking to a friend of mine, and we were quite young, and they had just finished doing their psychology degree. I think I was about 24 and they were 22, and they'd just gone out, got a job working, I think, for Anglicare or something like that. And they'd had no life experience. And they said, I'm trying to counsel these people that have had this trauma going on. So as hard as it has been for you, in a way, there's no way you could do what you do now if you hadn't been through that.
For sure. I mean, there's the saying, hurt people, and that is true. But there's also the counterpoint of that is healed people heal people. And so
Yes.
when we have gone through a period of pain and been healed in that pain, we, like, a lot of people are like, I don't know what my calling is. I don't know what my calling is. Well, what has your experience been? Because
Yeah.
your calling will be to serve out of the healed brokenness that you have been through.
Yeah. Yeah. Nikki Carlton writes, dismemberment is a much better description.
Yeah.
And don't forget, those watching, if you go over to our Facebook page, if you're watching from inside the group, if you open the page as well, you can comment there, and I can then bring your comments onto the screen. Otherwise, I'm happy to read them. Stay where you are is no fine. Now, just a quick another plug, hot off the press, literally just popped up on my feed just now. Rick Dingman, who is watching, Rick has accepted my challenge to do the gospel presentation this week. So tomorrow we've got Clinton Baldwin. The next day we've got Rick Dingman sharing his gospel message, and cannot wait. And thank you, Rick, for saying yes to that. And Clinton Baldwin is watching, and he just messaged me and said that the topic he's going to talk about this week is the required Sabbath, a person, not a day. SDA's greatest fear. Now, that's been a topic really swirling around all the groups I'm involved with online, so it's very timely. Sorry to interrupt our conversation there, but
No,
that's
that's
just
okay.
two things hot off the press that I really wanted to share. So let's talk about these words again. Disfellowship. We've chatted about how it's kind of a watered down thing. You know, it's more like a divorce. It's like you said, it's a dismembership, not a
Yeah.
disfellowship. Stephen Beagles writes, for every burden, there is a bigger blessing. And that's true
Mm.
too. So before we go into discipleship, the place where you are living now in your realm of service to others,
Mm.
and we'll talk about Border Church and some really exciting things that you've got coming up this month. Really
Yes.
exciting stuff we'll chat about soon. But let's go back to this disfellowship time. You'd already had a kind of a lot of this, as you're saying, melancholy and depression before this all happened. So you're finding your
Mm.
place in a church. Can you tell us where it was, a little bit more about it, what led to disfellowship, and any other details you want to share? We'd love to hear the real
Well,
story.
I don't come from an Adventist background. I don't even come from a Christian background. I probably, yeah, I can count on two fingers the number of times I went to church before I decided to follow Jesus. And that was for weddings. You know, when I was a kid,
Mm.
I was a ring bearer for one uncle and the other, and another uncle's wedding. So those two weddings they were the only, church uh, experience I had, other than going to Christian schools. But that was more chapel. You know, that was assembly. You know, I didn't see that as church. So I went to an open brethren school in North Brisbane called Mueller College from grade 2 to grade 8. No, yeah, grade 8, and then from grade 8 to finish, I went to an Adventist school. So that was my introduction to Adventism. I'm the only one who became an Adventist out of that experience. I'm the oldest of 5 children. It's probably because I was old enough to see some of the, see beyond some of the issues, like the nepotism that happens within the Adventist system, like the nepotism at schools. My brothers, and especially I've got an autistic brother, and so teachers' kids, pastors' kids, getting away with murder, while the book gets thrown at non-Adventist kids that make trouble. There were some issues there. We had a good principal when we first started going there, and then there was a not so good principal afterwards. And so that colored things and kind of pushed my family away, where I kind of, it was probably a combination of my, deeper cognitive looking, asking questions. Plus there was a girl I liked and she went to church. So I started going to church to see her outside of school hours, and then fell in love with Jesus. But, I never had I don't have a pedigree within Adventism, so I never was really in the clique. Like there's this clique within
Yeah.
Adventism, and so I had a up and down relationship with the church. Partly also because my mum did instill in me a high sense of moral justice, a high sense of social justice. And so, when I saw things that were not great, that I wouldn't, not say something, which has been a problem that I've had to face, and I've had to just accept the consequences. Some people say, you need to choose the hill you die on. I don't know how to. I'm just, if there's a hill, there's a battle. I'm in. Not for the sense of the battle, but to help the underdog sort of thing. And so, I've not really been an accepted part of Adventism in, like, from 1999 when I was baptized through to when I was disfellowshipped, and especially now. So Adventism has strengths and weaknesses. One of the weaknesses is potentially the not being inclusive, not being welcoming. Some churches are, some churches are not. Some parts of a church might be, other parts may not be. And so I tend to think that, and I know this is going to be different from a lot of your audience, but I see the theology of Adventism to be a strength, but the praxis of Adventism, the practical outworking of that theology, to be a big weakness. But that could be said for my own life as well. I've got to also, cling to Jesus. There, but for the grace of God go I. Do I allow God's grace as represented in the theology to work its way in my life? So I try to learn from the experiences that I've had. In fact, I've let my biggest thing was, what did I wish church was like, and that's what I want to create a community around with Border Church. So Stephen has said, why did I convert to Adventism? I found that I had been looking at that time. I'd done comparative religious studies in two different schools, the two ones that I mentioned. And I think I'd explored everything else. I'm like, well, okay, I'll have a look at Adventism. I was actually in that process of going down New Age. I was looking at New Age. I was always very spiritual, but I think it was the prophecies that convinced me to begin with, to give it a proper look. And then I met Jesus along the way, and haven't looked back from that. So, yeah.
Does Adventism have a little, like you said, there's a little bit of nepotistic stuff going, a little bit, not a little bit. Is it also kind of I've noticed in my involvement with other denominations, and I haven't left the church and joined anything else. I'm not going to ever sign up for anything again. But I've noticed now, from outside looking in, that Adventists often like to really define what the ideology is, and then you're either in or out. But they do that even within themselves. I've noticed amongst the progressive Adventists, the gospel Adventists, someone will do a gospel message and someone will say, well, I haven't quite got that right. Whereas in the other denominations, I've noticed, there's the big picture gospel, good news message, the connection with the abundant life and the teachings of Jesus. And then they might have small group discussions about how this might be looked at slightly differently or a different perspective. But they don't divide up in little groups. Whereas Adventists are great at defining their thing and then agreeing or disagreeing. And they just constantly, then that group breaks away and then they fight. And there's something in the very DNA of Adventism that seems to want to get the exact message just right. And if you don't get it, you're out, or you're in one group or the other. Did you find that at all in your... Because I kind of lived it,
I guess
marinated in it,
There's two types of exclusiveness, I guess you could say, within Adventism. The one I was talking about, the nepotism I was talking about, was more of bloodline pedigree. So, you often just in conversations, people in Adventism, it's amazing how many times they bring up what generation Adventist they are. It's like, well, who cares? Are you a follower of Jesus? Are you a first generation believer in Jesus? Is the real question, because we're not saved by our pedigree. But that happens, and you see it with like, I'm not going to mention names, but many of your listeners will know last names that that those families tend to go far within within Adventist institutions.
Yeah.
And also they get away with a lot at the same time. So it's not only do they go far, but there'll be lots of winking at sins or mistakes or whatever you call it within those families. But someone who doesn't come with that pedigree, doesn't have that background of support or anything, unless they were like a chosen mentee, someone who was mentored by one of those great names. And then there's the one that you're talking about, the exclusiveness, where we tend to, and I say we because I like to use that whole corporate ownership of things. We can get in that potential mindset of how much do you agree with me? How much do I differ with you? And is that is that room for parting ways? I personally look at more of what do we have in common rather than what do we not have in common. And I've found my life has been a lot happier since I've moved to that. I did go through that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had time in almost every subtype of Adventism at some point, whether it's the progressive side, the ultra conservative. I've been in independent ministry before, circled through the anti-Trinitarian movement for a time and gave that up. So I've had a fair, cross-section experience of Adventism, and you see that, there's definitely those subtypes where it's like, which tribe within Adventism are you?
And I think this happens within Adventism in a similar way to Jehovah's Witnesses and a similar way to Mormons, where they do like talking about multi-generational status. I mean, I often talk about my fifth generation, not in a sense of, so I'm that marinated in it, I can still break free and be my own person. So can you. Whereas other people use it to go, I'm fifth generation and I'm staying and I come from a great pedigree. But it's always wielded in a way that kind of points to the structure of it, points to the density of it, and points to almost you're glued into it. You become a part of this kind of multi-generation corporate machine, and it is your identity. And a lot of people, if they leave a Baptist church and go to another town and join an Anglican church, they've got no shift in identity. But any Adventist that leaves the Adventist church or has an experience like you has a huge, whoa, who am I now? A big search for their identity. And a lot of people won't leave because they can feel the rumblings of the psychological trauma that's about to set upon them.
Well, I was just about to get to that period. Like when I was disfellowshipped, we had a form. When I was recommended for disfellowship, I had a 5-month-old. And so I was in that point where I was about to raise someone within this machine. And, I was first generation, hot off the, actually of interest, that my great grandfather was an Adventist, but it had skipped 2 generations. So I can't really claim that I'm a 4th generation, but that was up in Miller. And then
There's
my grandfather, sorry?
There's a loophole there.
There is a loophole, but I've had no experience with Adventism growing up, so I'm safe from that. But it was in this period where like, my wife is from Armenia. I was going through a period where I wasn't very closely connected to my family, because when I became a Christian, they didn't understand that. There's a lot more coming around now, but there was that kind of a rift between me and my bio family. And then my wife has come from Armenia with no bio family here in Australia. So the church was our family, and we were so excited to raise a child within this family. And then that was pulled completely from underneath us. And so what you're talking about in terms of, the machine and all of that, like we were we were really going, what do we do now? What do we do now?
Can I ask, just to pad out a bit of detail, and sorry to jump in, but
Yeah.
what was your role at this time when you hear the winds blowing of disfellowship? What was your actual role? It was a paid role? What sort
No,
of
I was a
situation?
Sabbath school teacher. I
Right.
I was a Sabbath school teacher. I was kind of mentored in that role by David Ashrick, who was my pastor before COVID. He was the pastor before COVID. I had a good relation. In fact, when David Ashrick had started that church, I had asked my membership to be removed years and years ago because of the Trinity issue, and then I regretted it a few years later, and it took me about 12 years to get my not quite, yeah, about 12 years to get my membership back. And that happened by building a relationship of trust with David. And I'd only just got my membership back a couple of years before all of this fell apart. So I was like, yes, I'm back in, like I'm in, I've arrived, I'm back after years of supporting the church without being able to do anything. Anyway, the first thing I was done was made official in my role as a Sabbath school teacher, because I'd unofficially been basically helping teach the Sabbath school class prior to that, with an emphasis on the gospel, with an emphasis on broad strokes Christianity. And like at one stage, that class had been taught by someone who was actually last generation theologian, and I was a balancing influence there, trying to bring in, hey, no, sin is not action, it's a state, and therefore, righteousness is not action, it's a state, and it's a changed heart, and all of those sort of things. So I was very much engaged in that. And our Sabbath school was the largest Sabbath school in the church that I was teaching. I was co-teaching it with another mentor, a doctor friend of mine, and but our Sabbath school was dwindling, and all the Sabbath schools were dwindling. It wasn't just ours. I was noticing a trend, and I'm actually trained as a mental health practitioner, as a Christian counselor and therapist, family therapist. And so when I'm starting to see these sociological shifts in the church, I'm starting to say, hey, I'm trying to sound the alarm. Something's happening. We need to look at this. And then COVID happened, of course. And in COVID, I took a very strong stance for freedom. We're very close to the border here, as border church. We are near the Queensland-New South Wales border, which it brings its own divisions. Go Queensland for the origin. I might live in New South, but I'm a Queensland boy through and through. We were literally divided as a community, right down the middle. Families were eating lunch and dinner together over barriers. Businesses were losing half of their clientele who could not attend and patronize their establishments. People were hurting. And I believe that when society is hurting, the church has not only an opportunity, but a responsibility to step in and be agents of healing and agents of change. And unfortunately, David had moved on within only a couple of weeks before the first lockdown. The 15 days to flatten the economy, flatten the curve. Sorry, and then we had a new pastor and things. Anyway, we had a bit of a clash, and it was partly personality, partly ideological clash.
The new pastor, or with David, did you say?
The new pastor and myself.
Right. Yeah.
And
so David was the actual main pastor there.
Prior to COVID.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I knew he was a pastor, part of a team, but I wasn't sure he was the lead pastor.
He was the senior pastor. Yep.
Right. And just look, a quick aside, because a lot of people have asked me to ask you, where is David now? Is he still in Australia, or has he?
He's in Australia a few months every year, up to 2-3 months every year for Arise. When Arise, his school that is held at the first quarter of each year at the church that I was at. Yeah. But the rest of the time, he's in America. He's itinerant. I don't think he's connected to anything. Last I heard, he tends to be more around Ty Gibson than anything else, and
Yeah, well, that's their
working.
business, isn't it? The light bearers, isn't that their actual?
Yeah, they've got light bearers, but Ty is connected to a church. I think he's got a church in Tennessee.
Right, where he's an actual pastor now.
He's a pastor. Well, he was a pastor before that, in Oregon or Washington. He was on
Oh,
the
okay, I didn't
West Coast.
realize that. Right.
Yeah,
I always thought he claimed to be an entrepreneur and not an ordained minister, but maybe that changed along the way. I'm talking about when I first got to hear his stuff 15 years ago. So
maybe.
yeah. What there's been a bit of criticism with a lot of the independent ministries, particularly Arise. And I'm not criticizing them. I think they've got, great organization doing lots of good things. But there seems to be, some have said, almost like an infiltration of independent ministries within the Adventist Church, further kind of taking money to funneling to other things. I'm not making any accusations, but is that something you've noticed as well? Like, I feel like the because of the weakness of the church leadership at division and union level, that there's a vacuum created where a lot of the members are disgruntled and they go to the independent ministries. And I've spoken to people high up in the SPD, and they're concerned that all the money is going into the independent ministries, not into the church coffers. And I said to this guy in an actual face-to-face conversation once, I said, well, that's because you guys are showing such weak leadership. You're not stating who you support. Do you support both sides? Generally speaking,
I
or
agree
one
with
or
you.
the other. You're just so wishy-washy that
There's
people
a
are
split
just sick of it.
personality within Adventism in terms of its identity, and you've highlighted this many times. I wholeheartedly agree with your observations that they are. Are they going to go with the conservatives, or are they going? But they make neither happy.
Exactly.
Now,
yeah.
The ironic thing is the conservatives are the ones more likely to tithe, because the progressives are going to consider tithe to be an old covenant thing, more likely than not. And so, if you're going to go with anything, just choose the conservatives and just go with it.
And just go for it. Yeah, which is what
go
Ted
for
Wilson
it.
has done. Yeah.
Yeah, which Ted Wilson has done. He's got the pushback, but because of this identity crisis, people want to put tithe. I mean, that's become a very hot topic at the moment.
Hot topic right now. Yeah.
Since Conrad Vine has done his sermon, which he makes a good point, and it's a point I've made that the Adventist Church now. Well, I'm adding to it. The Adventist Church doesn't really listen to anything except for money these days, because it has become a business. Yeah. It is now a business, and it thinks through a business mindset. I mean, people being disfellowshipped or people being pushed out, like made to self-exclude or self-remove from the church, that all happens because we've gone from being a relational family orientation to a business orientation. Yeah. And under a business orientation, the design, like the objectives, your priorities is to maintain the status quo. It is to have the least amount of change. I mean, organizations can't shift as well as individuals or family groups and things like that. And so why I was disfellowship was largely because I upset the apple cart. I rocked the boat too much. It was not really for any sin. And I actually met with the head elder recently, and I said, here is the reasons given for why I was disfellowshipped out of the church manual. Can you give me the exact actions that I took that were this? And he said to me, I can't. He just said, I can't. And so
it was
I'm like,
more of a political maneuver.
It was a political. They gave 4 reasons why I was disfellowshipped. Only one of them had anything that I felt convicted about, and that one I apologized for. I did apologize for it, and so it's I think that an apology should be taken at face value, but what they decided to do was to say, no, we don't accept your apology. It's not a good enough apology, and so I was disfellowshipped anyway. So,
Yeah.
you know, had it been 100 years ago, where it was still a movement and not an institution, it would have been probably a very different thing. Or was I a part of a congregation that was more, you know, you can have movement level congregations within Adventism, you know, church plants and companies that are going to have more of a focus on growth than they are about maintenance. And so, yeah.
Yeah. I'll just bring a quick thing that Marie said just while we were touching on the Conrad Vine thing. And also Nikki Carlton asked, is there a reason why you keep referring to the church as we?
The Nikki Carlton one, can I get to that one a little bit
Yeah,
later? Is
we'll
that
come to that.
possible?
Sure,
Because I
yeah.
want to talk about that within the context of my now work. I still like to
Yes.
I still like to speak as in a corporate sense. I do like to speak in a corporate sense, and I'll talk about that in my
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, sure. We'll come back
But
to
with
that.
Marie's question,
I'll just
what
read it
she
out
said,
so that
yeah.
everyone can hear it. How about what Conrad Vine said recently, stating the faithful members need their own conference? He said, go woke or go broke. He's taken a lot of flack from the conference people.
I think
But
there's
he's
a little
also
bit of a
resonated, he's created flack with the conference people who, as you said, are running the corporation. And may I add, they're not doing a very good job at it. Like, yes, they're towing certain corporate lines, but they are not meeting the needs of their actual members, and the money that could come to them is being siphoned off to the other independent ministries. But
yeah.
so a lot more people have sided with him than I think the church has ever realized.
Look, it was bound to happen. I know Conrad; he's a very good man. I have a lot of love and respect for him, and I mean, he's someone I spoke. He ran some Daniel 11 conferences, and I spoke and presented papers at two of them. You won't find any ill word from me. I would say that there are a lot of over exaggerations of what he actually stated at the main conference. Please, people, do not take for gospel what A Today has said about it or what Fulcrum has said. You know, on the two sides of Adventism, you've got Spectrum and A Today, and you've got Fulcrum. Go to the source, listen to his sermon or sermons, and hear for yourself his words. He's not speaking. He didn't say that they need their own conference. He did speak about underground church movement, which is not necessarily a formal entity. He's talking about movement level rather than institution level action within the church. No formal incorporation of that as a conference. He stated, though, in looking at history, that when in the world wars, you did see the creation of a conference, which was the SDA reform movement, because of failures by the church leaders to address issues that were happening in certain areas. The difference with COVID was it wasn't localized to Eastern Europe or Vietnam or whatever. It was the whole world. And so any blunder that was happening by the church at the highest level was a something that was felt by every within every country. Yeah. So he's more talking about the history. I just want to push back on that and people go and hear the sermon for yourselves.
Yeah, as you and I have chatted, I'd love to have him on the program to just because our audience is very diverse, and he would
Yes.
in one shot be able to clear a clear message to that kind of audience. But
Yeah.
so let's get back to your disfellowship, and I'm glad you highlighted that. It wasn't for immoral or big misdemeanors. It was literally because of your stance on the vaccination and that kind of area.
Not just the
But,
vaccination, it was
but
lockdowns first. So when the
yeah,
lockdowns happened, I mean, these were unconstitutional in Australia. Like for the state border to be closed was unconstitutional. And I would do things like I would go to, cross the border at the checkpoints, and I would ask the police officers do you understand that this is unconstitutional? And Queensland police officers were telling me, we don't learn the Constitution, we just learn what the state law is. And I would post these interactions on Facebook, and that got me in. Just these interactions that I would post made me unpopular with my pastor, the new pastor. And as a result, he made things difficult for me and for our family at the church that we were at, to the point where at one stage we just, we had a meeting and said, we're just going to go to a different congregation. We can't do this. They said, no, please stay. We'd love to have you, we see your giftedness, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, okay, at the end of it, I said, okay, we'll give it another go. But then it happened again, to the point where my wife, now we've got a kid, fast forward 6 months, almost 7 months, we've got a kid, and they start doing the exact same things, and in a accelerated way. In fact, the pastor was preaching a series of sermons on how to deal with conflict in the church, while he was dealing while he was the source of conflict for our family. And it was just this really odd situation. Why I was disfellowship wasn't over those things. I didn't wear masks. I didn't, and I had reasons for it. I had an exemption. I was, I wasn't in favor of personally getting the jab, but I didn't have a problem with people who wanted to get it or who didn't. I was very much in the freedom lane. And so in an exchange on Facebook where I was looking at something, someone asked me a question. It was in a moment that was only a day after my wife had said, I'm not going back to that church, which meant I was now back in this situation of, well, do I stay with the crumbs they're giving me of teaching Sabbath school and not have my family and my new boy come to church with me, or do I find something else? And I made a statement that was critical of the leadership of the church, and that was their trigger for disfellowshipping me. I did apologize for that in letters to the board. But initially their reaction was so overblown, where not only was I told, you're being we're recommending for disfellowship, but I was told, and this was from one of the elders, if you don't turn up with a mask, we will get the authorities to remove you. That was, and my wife heard that. It was a shock to us. I had it on speakerphone when I got that phone call, and I was just like, what is this? And so I then started taking all the dialogue that was happening between me and the church to Facebook, partly because I'm in this situation where I'm in desperation. I'm like, I don't know what's happening. I'm getting divorced by my spiritual family here. What do I do? All of that's now archived. I've apologized for taking that public, and it wasn't a wise thing for me to do. But it was a moment where I was just like, I don't know what to do here. And so it was over criticism that actually, there were 4 things out of the church manual that as I mentioned, that they pulled out. One was the bringing reproach on the, actions that bring reproach on the church. That's the only one that they really could have stuck, that I felt. And I apologized in 2 letters to the board prior to the disfellowship. And the only thing I stated at my disciplinary hearing was that I apologize. I basically made a list of people I could potentially apologize to, and I apologized for everything I could in terms of how I'd hurt people. The other ones were...
Just before we leave that part of it, I'm not sure what you were apologizing for. You mentioned, but I thought I didn't quite see why you had to apologize for that.
So one of the things that happened was, usually the period of time between recommending for disfellowship and the disciplinary hearing is short, about 2 weeks. And so I got the letter in late, the end of July, and it was scheduled for early August in 2021. Now, what happened after that was 2 things. My family and I, our lease was already up. We were already in the process of moving, and we found a location to move in Queensland. So we moved house from Tweed Heads to Elanora into Queensland. And as we were moving, the border closed, and it did a hard close that lasted for 7 months. So, and the day that I did the final bond cleaning was the day that they closed it completely. So I was basically just getting out of New South Wales into Queensland. And so in light of that, they couldn't disfellowship me in absentia. I had the right to appear. And so initially they were saying, oh, we'll do it, we'll broadcast, we'll simulcast the business meeting to a church in Queensland, and you can see it on the screen. And I said, no, that's not acceptable. I need to be in the room with people. And so eventually that got shut down, and they said, okay, well, we'll revisit this when it opens. And so it took until January to open. So from August till January, the border was closed, and I wasn't able to attend the meeting. And so it was this long drawn out time during which we planted this church, Border Church, and I'll talk about that in a second. But in that time, I kept on hearing all these things people were upset with me for. And they were things like, oh, you were curt to someone while you were setting up Sabbath school one day. I'm like, okay, I guess so. Maybe it was early morning, might have been a little bit less polite than normal. So that person's name got put in the thing. I apologized, as far as the online stuff, I apologized for the confusion and upset that people felt. I didn't apologize for the fact that I was upset. I just apologized that in my lack of wisdom, in my impetuousness, I had hurt people. I apologize to the pastor for being vocal about criticisms of him, even though I still maintained those criticisms internally. I can apologize. There's a book that I read the title of, and it was all I needed. Sometimes you just read a title and you're like, that's an amazing title. And I want to get the book one day. It's called You Don't Have to Be Wrong to Repent. And so I took that to heart while I was reflecting over the months leading up to the disfellowship, the disciplinary healing. I was like, God, what can I work on? And so I apologized in letters. I had mentors that I approached and said, look, what can I do? And so people like Vern Parmenter and who was an elder at the church that I was, and also as a former vice president of the General Conference, I went
his
to people.
His brother was Keith Parmenter, wasn't he?
Yeah, and so I went to these people. I said, please, help me to help me to know what I can apologize for and how to write it in a way that it'll be heard. So I wrote 2 letters. The first one was sent. I got back feedback. Oh, it wasn't enough. So I went even further. The second letter, still not enough. In person, still not enough. So I didn't apologize enough. Is the end result, and so I was disfellowshipped.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Like, there's some misdemeanors that are way more, what shall we say, intense than yours, and yet, if you know the right people, there's really no sanctions. And I know other pastors, I won't mention their names, but they've had, they've made some mistakes and they've apologized for them, and there's no way they're getting back in.
Well, it's that nepotism we've been talking about. At the very church that I was disfellowshipped out of, there have been adulteries that have just been winked at. There have been gambling and other things that have just been like, oh well, we'll just ignore that. And my wife made the mistake of, well, she wrote a letter saying, I want to remove my membership from this church to any other church in the world. Like, I don't care. I want to move it from this congregation because of what it's done to my husband. And she listed things and named people within the church, and they threatened to disfellowship her for naming the names of people who've done bad things in the church. And rather than looking at themselves, look, human folly is a smorgasbord for. It's best not to focus on it too much.
Yeah, and look, it's not attacking the Adventist church by saying this. Yes, every church has its faults and flaws and all. That's true. Every church does. But there's a certain intensity within Adventism that that has a kind of a structure that if you go through some of these normal things to be found everywhere, they're intensified and they're more polarized.
Yeah.
And they can lead to a deeper spiritual abuse and less pastoral care than I personally, but I think there's a lot of evidence to support it, have found in any other denominations. I've been involved since the early 80s with Baptists, Anglicans, Methodists, playing music in all the different denominations, and I've witnessed all of the same downfalls, the infidelities, the stealing of funds, the misappropriation of whatever. I've seen all of that, but there is a different kind of vein of Christianity running through a lot of these general Protestant churches that I have not found with the same intensity as in Adventism. And I wonder if the church, instead of saying, hey, that's not us, stop attacking us, went, hang on, let's look at this. Let's actually see if we can fix this in some structural way so it doesn't keep happening.
Look, yeah, I agree. Gospel Adventist has just said something that I would like to respond to. He said, the head elder had it out for you. I want to push back on that. The head elder there is someone who took the head eldership kind of reluctantly. He's very, very much a person who I respect, even though we've had disagreements, even though he's been a part of things that have hurt our family. I respect the head elder there. I think that other people had it out for me above the church itself. I know that the union and conference got involved, and in fact, we could probably talk about. I have, pissed off people high up in the church at other times, not just over the COVID thing. One day, Peter wants me to talk about my involvement with hacking the White estate and releasing or forcing them to release all of the Ellen White unpublished material. So, there are people who had it in for me above that.
And just to jump in there, just to highlight that, we are coming back soon with a real astounding interview with you on that specific topic. I can't wait. So just to let everyone know, that's coming up in hopefully a couple of weeks.
Yeah, probably after our outreach, so maybe October onwards. Maybe close to October 22, we could do it as the Ellen White Day. Yeah, we can talk about that. But it was, it was. I think it was people had it out for me above, and I know for a fact that the thumb, that was placed on the scales from above, because people have told me. I've still got friends high up within the church, enough to be able to, tell me these types of things. So, I like I've said, there's folly in humanity that we could feast on for a long time, but it's not where we should stay. And a lot of this story, that I've shared so far is, there's a lot of pain there, but in that pain, God brought an amazing thing, which was the fellowship that we now have, which was created in that space between, we want to disfellowship you, we've disfellowshipped you. And, if I ever write an autobiography, that chapter will be called How I Survived Disfellowship by Planting a Church.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even an intention.
Yeah. Rachel Anonymous says, "Oh, I want to hear that story. The Holy Hacker." I think she's come up with the title. But like you say, you could sit there and just wallow or focus on or spend your energies trying to rectify the injustice of your experience. Are you happy now to move a little bit into what you're doing now? And I just want to quickly say, if people watching, if there are any particular questions you have, ask them right now. If you want to talk about the disfellowship side of things, because we're now going to move into a new phase. We're going from the holy to the most holy of the conversation. I just want to kind of be able to leave behind the disfellowship side. But if there are any questions, just quickly bring them up and we can look at those. And while
I just want to briefly mention, Debbie Hooper has just published an article in Adventist Today regarding.
You're reading my mind, because I literally was about to say, while people are checking out if they've got a question to ask you. And I'm glad you raised that too. Debbie has written this
Excellent.
article here in Adventist Today. It's funny, this came out today, which is September 3 in the States. We're September 4 here. Divided we stand. Traditionalists rise against church leadership. Can't wait to read that article, Debbie. And I think Debbie's going to come on the show in a couple of weeks and chat a little bit about her work in journalistic work. So go and check that out. And I thought, let's give a little plug to the competition there. We've also got released today the Fulcrum. And what have they written there? Michigan, is it Michigan or Michigan? Michigan. Conference bans Conrad Vine from speaking in their pulpits. So
Well,
there's
see, that's interesting because that's where he's located.
Yeah.
You know, he's at Village SDA Church. So that's a shame because Village SDA Church is opposite Andrews University, and that's I'll be following that with interest. I'll be following that with interest.
Yeah. We'll go and read those two articles for sure.
I will. I can't wait to read yours, Debbie. Debbie's actually the sister of my head elder at Border Church. So there's a connection there. Yeah.
Wow.
Now there is a question here from Cindy Lou. Can you see that one on the side here?
Yes. Let's bring that one up. Here we go. Brendan, were you barred from entering the premises?
During the disfellowship, I was not permitted to enter the business meeting, the disciplinary meeting, until after all of the charges against me were made. I was then brought in and told that I had to respond to the charges that I had not been allowed to hear. So they spent 90 minutes basically attacking me, and then I was brought in. My wife wasn't allowed in either. And then after we had said our parts, we were asked to leave, and we weren't brought back in for a vote. My wife was deprived of her vote. I was deprived of mine. I still had a vote until I was disfellowship. And so that was for the meeting. I was then told after it was a very close vote. It actually came down to two votes. It was a very large meeting. Like there was about 80 people present, and the disfellowship was carried by 2 votes. And it went for 5 hours. It started at 7 and ended after midnight. And like all said and done. So and we had at that time we had a 11-month-old. So we were looking after an 11-month-old. It was in the humidity of February in Tweed Heads. So that was the situation. Afterwards, because it was such a close vote, the pastor and the pastoral team came to me and said, "You're always welcome. You're always welcome." Well, that's not the case anymore. I sought to build a bridge by visiting the new conference president this year, and I went to Big Camp to do so. It was like a day trip. I was going to be down and back. I made an appointment with him at first thing in the morning at the office at Big Camp, and within an hour I received an email saying, "Get off the property. You're no longer welcome at any North New South Wales property or SDA event within North New South Wales indefinitely until you resolve things with the church that removed you." So, on the part of the people at the local church, they said, "Yes, you are welcome." From coming down as a mandate from the conference, no, I'm not welcome. So that's
interesting.
That's the situation as it is. I hope that is reversed at some point. I hope, I overreacted when things happened. I hope that they're just overreacting and that'll.
Well, I think though, like you say, that it's coming from higher up, putting their thumb on the scales. So it may never change unless the independent ministries gain more power within the church with that, which they are doing by the day.
Well, I have said to them that I will defy that. If there's a funeral of someone I care about, if there's a wedding I've been invited to, if there's a baptism of someone I care about, if there's a baby dedication, I have friends, I have people I love within the conference, and I will, they'll have to decide whether to enforce that through treating me as a trespasser, as the letter indicates, or just letting it go. But I will value relationship over, a decree such as that. They'll have to make their determination. I will respectfully defy it in those instances. So
Marie has just written, so your charges are for not talking nice to a few people and not wearing a mask.
Well, technically not. The not wearing a mask just annoyed a few people. If you ask them, I said bad things, and we say bad things, and not kind things. I could have the fruit of the Spirit manifesting more fully in my life, definitely. And I wholeheartedly understand that, I'm a sinner that needs grace every day. So we can come to the most holy place now.
Yeah, just about. There's just a couple of quick things, and then we're going to leave it with we're going to have a little break so we can divide the two in the conversations there.
That'll be the veil. The veil.
That's the veil between the two, and it won't be torn asunder. A couple of quick thoughts still on this. Mark Anthony says, I grew up hearing that SDA equals Laodicea. So what is new? So with your disfellowshipping, how does that play into this kind of Laodicean focus on things that aren't really important? For example, Rose Power adds, how does the church call that love? And she went through a similar experience and is coming on the program very soon with Gillian Ford to talk a little bit about some of those experiences. Yeah, so how can a church, is Mark right? Mark Anthony saying that the Adventists are just Laodicea. Does this play into it where they're just focusing on things that have nothing to do with pastoral care or love? That, or do they have a leg to stand on? I don't know. How does it play?
We all have cognitive dissonance of some sort. We all have some sort of cognitive dissonance. We believe this and we do that. It's what Paul is talking about in Romans chapter 7. The thing I don't want to do, I do, and we have this. The self-identification as Laodicea should make us so much more compassionate with each other, but it doesn't always manifest that way. The basking in 1 Corinthians 13 and the love that God has for us should give us more compassion, but it doesn't always. And that's not just them; that's me too. Me too. I have kids. Patience is something you learn more and more every day. And so, I've got to be patient with their lack of patience as well, not just kind of insisting it ought to be. Yes, it ought to be a certain way, but so same with me. I ought to be better than I am. So I can't sit in judgment. It's not my place. I can talk about these things, and as I talk about them, I'm not talking about them in a way that, these are bad people. No, these are people that Jesus died for. He loves them. They made some, I believe, bad decisions, decisions that don't reflect what they believe, what they profess to believe. Doesn't mean they're bad people. It means probably, I would hope that they get to a point where they can look at themselves and they get an experience where they can see that. But it's, I don't think we should be judging. And I do see that in the ex-Adventist community a lot, where people judge for wrongs that have happened. But, that's this, what about the speck in, what about the log in your eye?
Yeah, exactly.
I've also been excommunicated from an ex-Adventist Facebook group because I wasn't ex-Adventist enough. I wasn't anti-Adventist enough. So it can happen in both places. I'm a radical inclusivist now, in the sense of, come to the table, come and let's talk.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why you're speaking here on SDAQ&A today, because we're kind of a group that does accept discussing divergent views. Okay, so we are going to have a short break, 5-minute break. Go and grab yourselves your SDA Q&A mug, make a hot drink, cold drink, whatever you like. Or yes, or fill up your water bottle, and we will be back. Our first part of this conversation has been discussing Brendan's being disfellowshipped from a church up there on the border of Queensland, New South Wales, and we're going to now discuss his new venture, his discipleship with his new church, border church, and some exciting things they're doing. So we will be back very soon, right after this break.
You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, then all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
And welcome back. I'm here with Brendan Valiant. Would you call yourself the pastor of Border Church, or how
That's what they call me.
Yeah.
When people call me pastor, I often find myself looking behind myself, see who they're talking to. Look, I've gotten used to it, but I don't put on airs. I'm not all about titles. Sometimes I joke and say, "Our pastor was my dad." No, not really, but I just want to say hi to Alina. My wife is watching. It's just
nice.
Watching. She's wanting to know when she can come home. She's got the kids out. We're just getting into the good stuff, babe. So you can come back anytime. It'll be fine.
We don't mind seeing her or the kids running around.
She's more worried about the background noise.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, like I'm the pastor there, and recently we've connected with a group called Southern Cross Association of Churches. So as of now, I'm eligible for marriage endorsement. So that's the only thing that I didn't have until now. So that has only come in recently, and we'll probably keep that one up until we get our own denominational status. But yeah, so
you're heading towards being an actual church. I think I seem to remember when I interviewed you the very first time, is that it in some ways I got the impression that it was just, hey, well, we're just treading water until maybe I can be back in my church, or until we can absorb back into the mainstream.
Not
but it
really.
seems to me now that it's more getting its own legs.
So what we started is we started when I got cut off from the border, from the church that wanted to disfellowship me. I wasn't the only person who lived in Queensland who attended that church. So what I did is I called up people and I said, let's do home church until the border opens. And so we started home churching because there was nothing. There was nothing. There was no reaching out by my former church to the people who were cut off. So we started doing that. We started meeting in homes, and then we started outgrowing those homes because people were inviting friends who were not Adventists, who were not part of the church. And then there was an interesting thing that happened, which was there was this one Sabbath, this one Saturday, this one weekend, where in New South Wales, churches were allowed to be open, but not to have unvaccinated attend. You probably remember that there was this one week. It was in October of 2021. It was in October of 2021, and this week it was the point at which we just outgrown house church. And so I said to our team, I said, why don't we do church on the border? Because according to the public health orders, there's nothing to prevent people having a picnic. And if we happen to have picnic together, like in proximity to one another, and there's no, at that time there was limits on congregational singing in New South Wales. The people up the front, the music leaders could sing, but you had to sing inside your head, because if you sing praise to Jesus, you'll give COVID to people, was the logic in the congregation. They couldn't, but you could. And so I said, there's no limits on singing outside. There's no need to wear masks outside, and there's no need to do QR check-ins outside. And so I said, do you want to do it in this place? It was there's this place on the border which was a no man's land, and both states could go. In fact, it was this place that was considered to be, let's just wink at it, let's ignore it, because it's technically New South Wales, but it's treated as Queensland.
Right. So it's literally border church.
Yeah.
As well as a metaphorical border church.
Well, border church was just a joke. I just said, hey, instead of home church, let's do border church.
I love it.
And the name stuck. The name just stuck. So we did it this one week. We ended up having 30-odd people show up, because there were people us Queenslanders hadn't seen our friends from New South Wales. And the churches in New South Wales, by and large, decided to close for that week and said, well, if we can't open to everyone, we'll open to no one. And so we ended up having this influx of people from New South Wales joining us from Queensland. And it was a great old time. It was such a fun time. And we ended up continuing to do that until the border opened. And we had upwards of 60 people sometimes coming to our it started with one gazebo. It ended up growing to 4 gazebos, and we just, have lunch. We'd We'd do a Bible study. We'd do, it was just sitting around in a circle doing the Bible, singing some songs off of Bluetooth. I went for years that I didn't play the guitar because and so my hands weren't callous. So I wasn't playing the guitar at the time. I only just got back into that. And my hands were all soft again. So we just used a Bluetooth for, which meant that Michael W. Smith was, singing for us. We had Darlene Sheck. We had the great singing for us. But we would sing along to that, and it was just such a magical time. It was during La Nina, so it should have rained every Saturday. In fact, it was supposed to, and yet Saturday after Saturday after Saturday, 10 Saturdays in a row, it didn't rain. In fact, there was one week when it was raining in the morning, and I joined a prayer meeting, a Saturday morning prayer meeting online, and we prayed. But when we finished praying, the sun was just coming out, and I said, "You know what? Pack up the car. We're going to go anyway, even though it's just been raining." We got there, and by the time people arrived, dry ground, blue skies. It was just incredible. We had this amazing time of just. And people would come, that other Christians would find us, non-Christians who were just, shocked by what was happening in the world were coming, and people were inviting friends. It was an amazing time of fellowship that was just exciting and I didn't intend it to be a church plant. I just thought as soon as the border opens up, we're back. We're back. Even if they kick me out, I'll go back. But then something happened was that these people who were not from the Adventist circles started to, get to know us. We're starting to meet with them more often, not just at Border Church or whatever that was, at the time. We were starting to meet together, have friendships, build friendships. It was creating its own culture. So initially, I send word to the conference and I say, "Hey, I think I have a fledgling church plant here. Do you want it?" And they said, "Only if you're not involved." Basically, if you're not involved, you're too hot, we're not going to take it. And I said, "Are you sure?" And so, they met with us. Like, that's a long story short. There was a bit of flirting, we flirted with the idea, but eventually it was just like, no, unless you're out of the picture, we won't take it. And what they really meant was, we'll take it and then we'll absorb it into a different church plant that's already in the area. Yeah. And I'm like, no, this is its own culture.
How many kind of members did you have at that time?
We were having between 30 and 40 at that time. At that time when I first approached them, like that was our average.
That's a great healthy little start.
It's a healthy little start, and we're about 30 at the moment, but we've had some ups and downs since then. But we probably 2/3 were Adventist. 2/3 of who were coming were Adventist. Now it's like 2 couples plus my family have an Adventist background. Everyone else is not. So It's very different. A lot of the Adventists have gone back to where they were, but they refused. They rejected our offer, and then we came up with an idea where we're like, okay, how about we give you, just to show our desire to work together, we give you an apportionment of tithe commensurate to the way that the Adventist Church divides tithe. So for $100 of tithe, according to the South Pacific Division working policy, $55 stays in the field, and the other 45 is divided between conference and conference departments. It's divided between union, division, and GC. I think GC by 2030 they're going to get 3%. At the moment it's 2-point-something%. The division gets like 6% or something like that. The union gets a bit more, and then the conference gets a bit more. And so I said, okay, we'll give you a portion of that similar to what you're getting, what you're taking, and then we'll keep the field amount for us. And they said, possibly for the first time in history, we don't want your money. Possibly for the first time in history, the church said, we don't want your money, because they didn't want to honor our existence. So they hated us more than they loved the money, which was very odd. I'm not a very loved person for some reason by the establishment types. to the point where we had Graham Hood, and I know you had him on your program a little while ago, and Graham Hood came to speak at Border Church, and now he's not liked by the establishment, but they warned us. Sorry, they warned him not to come to us, not us not to have him. So on the totem pole of being disliked, we're more disliked than Graham Hood, and his going all the way around.
Wow. I've just brought up onto the screen your website there.
Yes.
If people want to go and check it out.
It's border.church. Yeah, border.church.
So if they just type in www.border.church.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
If you type borderchurch.com, it'll redirect you there as well.
Yeah, I found it just came up straight away when I just put Border Church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so we offered and tried to bend over backwards to accommodate the church having some involvement with Border Church. But as we got to the end of that process, we said, well, you know what? God's giving us something else. He's giving us a different path. And so while I was also meeting in the park and we were starting this thing, there was another group that was meeting at a different section of the border that was praying for the border. And this group was a very there were Pentecostals, there were Baptists, there was people from all sorts of Christians coming to pray, forgetting what their background was, and just pray for this border to come down because of the pain the community was in. And so I started going there. That was meeting Friday nights and Sunday nights. Same thing. No, never did it rain when we were meeting. So same thing as Border Church. And to the point where one day we saw the clouds coming, and then they parted around our group, and just it was amazing. And so we were praying for this border to be shut down. Border wall to be torn down. Sort of that whole Gorbachev tear down that wall sort of thing. And so we're in this group, and I'm meeting these other Christians, and I'm going, hey, how insular was I in the Adventist church? I'm starting to see these people are beautiful Christians, and I was the one being viewed suspiciously because I've come out of Adventism. And I started to realize, well, Adventism has really got a bad PR situation here, very, very bad, and needs to, so I was happy to start moving away. Sorry, I'm just going to mute conversation here. Mute that one.
It's interesting when you just said that, it made me realize that when I was an Adventist, people on the outside treat you differently. When you're on the outside, people treat you just like another one of the community, and they speak their mind about Adventism. And so Adventists aren't getting the feedback. And I wanted to say, as we came back from our break, we aren't attacking people. This is a systematic problem, a systemic problem, a corporate problem. There is demonstrable issues within the church that are huge, and they're not being addressed, largely because people aren't really seeing things for what they really are. And so don't shoot
There's an echo
the
chamber.
messenger.
It's an echo chamber. It's creating this insular view, and it's impossible. And you would know that. You've come out and you've seen it from a different perspective, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now, I love the Adventist church. I love the, much of the teaching of it is just, I can't fault it, in terms of the theory, but it's the practice that we have. I mean, I'm not going to say the Old Testament is rubbish because the Jews, crucified Jesus. It's that was part of their theory, and they got it wrong. Our practice can get things wrong, and I think that we need to be aware of that ability for cognitive dissonance to come in.
Isn't it interesting, though, that in your new Border Church, where now the majority have no connection to Adventism, but they're seeing you practicing how a church community can be practiced, are they still reticent that you're about to wheel out Ellen G. White and 1844 and the investigative
We never
judgment?
use Ellen White. I never have had to use Ellen White, and in fact, I never liked Ellen White being used in a pulpit sense anyway. I never liked it because, if you want to obey her, she says don't do that. Her words were don't do that. Don't use her in that sense. And so people who use her, well-meaning as they are, I mean, even David Ashrick uses her in the pulpit. I'm like, why do you need that? The Bible is so rich. I would never have to go to her because the Bible is so full of her writings are now moved to my garage. Like, they're in the garage. I don't even consult them. I don't need to. I stick to the beauty of Scripture, and I'm happy that I don't have to get into these, Ellen White conversations with people these days, because, I mean, the problem with her is she wrote so damn much that, that's why I hacked the White Estate, is because I didn't want there to be, you write something about what Ellen White believed about something, and then, in 10 years' time, they release a book that's got new statements from her that, you've never taken into account. Anyway, it's just too much. Get to the Bible, people. It's so enriching. If we ever have a person who comes from the Adventist church who comes and speaks at Border Church, I say, make your case from the Bible. If you can't make your case from the Bible, don't make your case. And so people, like, that's what I've modeled. I mean, Sabbath. You come to Border Church, you're not going to get confronted with a happy Sabbath, even though we meet on Saturday. I've told our people, we are going to model Sabbath. We are not going to force it down people's face, throats. People come to us and they go, I love this. I want to do this more often. They've adopted Sabbath without knowing it. And in fact, Sabbath is becoming, as I've talked to ministers of different churches and ministry leaders in different ministries, Sabbath is growing in its acceptance by mainstream Christianity. A lot of people are accepting a Saturday Sabbath, even though they go to church on Sunday.
And do you think, as John Kalis says here, that is the seal of God a rotation of the sun? Will you come to a time where you will say, I'm glad you're enjoying the rest, the Sabbath? Do you see yourself coming to a time where you'll need to say, and also it is the seal of God?
The seal of God is the Holy Spirit. Okay, the Scripture is very plain on that. The seal of God can manifest in everything that the Holy Spirit presses upon your heart. If the Holy Spirit is convicting you of something, then, and you disobey it, then you're rejecting the seal of God. Okay, that could be Sabbath. That could be a fruit. In the case of Adam and Eve, that could be a fruit. It could be murdering your brother in the case of Cain. Whatever the Holy Spirit is impressing on your heart is part of the seal, because the Holy Spirit is the seal. Now, for some people, that will incorporate the Sabbath. For some who don't have that knowledge, it won't be a part of what the seal of God is. There is context to these things. And so, I reference Sabbath just on our last sermon, which was our last sermon for a month. I spoke about Sabbath, how Sabbath is used by Adventists. I mean, the Adventists use it as like Sabbath is an exclusive day of worship. That's the way they practice it. The fourth commandment doesn't mention worship at all. It mentions rest. And what I was pointing out, because we're about to use our next 4 Sabbaths for workshops at church, I had some of the people who do come from a Sabbath background ask me questions, not in a negative way, just ask me questions. Well, is this violating Sabbath for us to do workshops? And I just said to them, what's my busiest day? I'm the pastor here. What's my busiest day? And they said, well, obviously Sabbath. And I said, yes. Does that mean I'm violating Sabbath every week? And no. And so my sermon was Saved to Serve, and I talked about the priesthood of all believers, and that priests, one of the busiest days is going to be Sabbath. And that now is for all Christians. Now, I did point out for people who believe that they're in an eternal Sabbath, every day is Sabbath. Well, you better be bloody busy every day, because every day is, every day you need to be working at Sabbath level energy as a priest. Now, it's rest from your work, not rest from any work. It does say any work, but any work is your work. It's going back to it. So obviously it's, if God commanded the Israelites to march around Jericho 7 days, one of those days was Sabbath. It's not breaking Sabbath to obey God. It's it's breaking Sabbath to disobey God in what He's called you to do. And so I pointed out, and that was satisfying to everyone. Everyone was like, "Yeah, this is great. We're going to use we're going to be priests. We are priests, but we're going to use our priesthood to serve the community for the next 4 Saturdays, and we're going to do this every September, and probably for a month after Easter every year as well."
Yeah, this idea I really love about what you're doing, and you know, I watch in online to your programs and follow the stuff that you're doing there. And one of the threads that just comes through the whole time is service to the community. So you're building people together. They enjoy the worship, the fellowship, the hanging out, the camaraderie. They're feeling cared for. Pastoral care's coming into play. But then you challenge them. Let's serve the community. And this is what you're saying right now, which is an exciting thing that you're doing right now. Can you share a little bit more about what this is that you're doing this month? Started already last weekend?
It starts this week. So it's every Saturday. It's 4 Saturdays in September. We're going to be doing. We're going to be running workshops. Now, this is workshops. Adventists have run workshops before. Other churches run workshops. In fact, I got the idea for the way that we're wanting to do this from 2 sources. One is a Pentecostal pastor, a good friend of mine. And when I got moved out of the Adventist church, I sought community where I could find it. And I sought mentorship. I had mentors abandon me. And, and so I've sought for mentorship for where I can find it. Now, obviously my greatest mentor is the Holy Spirit and Jesus and through the Bible. But I filter everything. I've always filtered everything anyone tells me, whether they're an Adventist mentor or not. But I've got this mentor, and he runs a church called Chapel Church, Gold Coast Chapel. And they run they started out 10 years ago as small as us. And they've grown to like 400 people. They run every 6 months. They run what they call a banquet, where they run workshops for the community. And I love this idea. Now they're north end of the Gold Coast, so I wanted to do something here. And so they run things like as diverse as like Auslan classes to teach basic Auslan, to teach people to like obviously cooking and sewing and everything that you could think of now. They have like dozens and dozens of courses every 6 months. And I want to build to that. So we're starting off with just a health course and a cooking course. So I guess 2 cooking courses. One of them is an Adventist one that I was trained in. So it's Enhance Your Gut Health. So we're running that. So that's an Adventist one. I'm just going to use the slides that I've been trained in. Start with what you know. Start with what you know. And the other one is Frugal Feast, which that's our course. We're running that to help people to cook, choose and prepare food on a budget. Basically inflation is hitting everyone. And so we're using that one. That is based on another Adventist program called Food Sense. We just can't use Food Sense because I don't want to direct people to the Hope Channel website. I want to, if we're not being treated, in a cooperative with the Adventist Church, we'll run it under our own branding. So we've called it Frugal Feast. We're also got things that we'll do throughout September and beyond, like a car care course, basically to help people who want to know how to, do basic, change your oil, check your oil, stuff like that. We want to do these types of things to help my wife. She's currently studying her final units at university, but in the past we have done basic conversational English. She's a teacher. She's taught ESL. So we'll do basic conversational English classes for people who are from overseas studying here. These are the things that we want to do. But the revolutionary thing was what my head elder said, Debbie's sister. She said, let's do it on Saturday. Let's do it instead of church. And there was a part of me that was that initial reaction, but we can't do that because people are used to having church. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-record I'll pre-record a message for people, because we have people who watch online from all over the world who watch what Border Church is doing. But what we'll be doing is, like, you try to get everyone to turn up at a time other than church. Everyone's busy, but everyone's already committed for Saturday mornings. So we're going to do the workshops on Saturday morning. This makes sense. And since then, other church pastors have come to me and said, I like this idea. Could we potentially do this for a Sunday in the future and join with you? So we only have room to do 2 workshops at the moment. Maybe we'll have room for 3 or 4 next September.
That's fantastic.
But there might be a church down the road that's got people who are skilled in another thing, and we can say, hey, if you're not interested in what we're offering, we're going to run it as it can be multiple churches. And now I've got the idea of Service September. So Service September, and also, after Easter as well. But Service September could be something that, churches that are small and wanting to grow, we can do it together. And this comes into that combined church space. I'm very much in that combined church space. I've used my Sunday mornings, by and large, to go and visit Sunday churches, build relationships with pastors and ministry leaders, and I'm no longer seen as a threat. In fact, people come to our church on a Saturday and then go to a different church on a Sunday. I encourage it. I'm like, don't come. It shouldn't be a either or. Go to both. We call it a double dose of the Holy Ghost. What's a good day to worship God? Any day ending in Y. And so, all the more the merrier. And so we've got these. We've had people send people to us who go. I'm talking pastors. People have come to their churches, and the pastor has said, "You guys might be a better fit for this person. I'm sending this person to you," and we've ministered to them for a period. I've actually sent people to churches on Sunday that have more of we've now got more of a kids program, but we didn't. And I've said, hey, this group has got a kids program. I think that is a revolution. Like, sheep stealing is a mentality that comes when you've got fiefdom, when you think in fiefdom. But when you think in kingdom terms, you don't think about sheep stealing. It's sheep sharing.
Yeah.
Okay. It's sheep sharing. And I recently, I was, because of my work in the combined churches space, I'm now the chairperson of the Ministers Fraternal for the Southern Gold Coast and North and Tweed Heads area.
Wow.
So I've and as part of that, I seek to build closer relationships between the churches, opportunities for service. For example, one of the things that we have, the local Anglican school is donating, it's very close to donating one of their fleet of buses that is getting a bit older, so a 57-seater bus, so that we can use it as a sleep bus for people in coming out of domestic violence and those sort of situations. And that will be a corporate, that'll be owned by all the churches as a project, because the Anglicans don't have enough manpower to volunteer that and fill that, but together we do. And we've been looking at, in the Moorlambar churches, they run a fun day, a free community fun day every Anzac Day. So after the marches are over, everyone goes to the showgrounds. And this year we had a rock climbing wall. That's what Border Church brought to the thing. But they've got face painting, they got woodworking, they got just so much that goes on for the balance of the day. We've been doing that for the last 4 years in Tweed Heads at the first Saturday in December. So basically, we close up Border Church, go across to the park where we started, and in that park we do a fun day it started with 3 churches. It's now up to, last year it was 14 churches, and this year it's going even bigger, and we're actually going into the evening and going to run a carols concert. So we're now moving towards that. The Gold Coast churches, so I've got a foot in both fraternals. I've got a foot in the Gold Coast fraternal and Tweed fraternal. I chair the Tweed one, but I'm also in, and the Gold Coast one is going gangbusters. They've partnered with Griffith University, and they've got a domestic violence prevention course called MATE that they run, and they run this to train people in what to look for and how to deal with domestic violence in the community. It has reduced domestic violence within the Gold Coast. They're now working with council in that. They run what's called Easter United, which is a grand celebration of Easter every year. The combined churches come together, thousands of people on Broadwater parklands to celebrate, the resurrection on Easter Sunday in the afternoon. I love this space. I worked with the Will Graham Evangelistic Association. In fact, the photo you use in the promo was of the Will Graham. Will Graham was Billy Graham's grandson. He came and did a celebration in the Gold Coast, and we had hundreds of people give their lives to Jesus. And I celebrate all of this. I celebrate every single bit of it.
That was a fabulous photo, by the way.
Yeah, my boy he's very photogenic. He makes me look good.
But it was a very genuine moment. You were captured, lost in the moment, and I think
the afters were singing.
Oh, really? And I love how you get excited when you talk about this discipleship stuff. And I think it's good to highlight that you've come from Adventism. You didn't want to leave Adventism. Internally, there's a lot of a theological, doctrinal connect for you personally. But as you turn into a more community-based, focused movement, based on the scripture, gospel, teachings of Jesus, you seem to be able to separate these personal views without a hidden agenda. And that you are promoting a church group that is offering pastoral care, community service, support for your local membership, all the stuff really that should be happening in all church groups.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not afraid of positions I hold either. Like I'll preach on things that every 6 months I do a controversial series or mini series in my preaching schedule. I like expository preaching, so my balance of the year is preaching through Paul's letters. So I've done Galatians and James. I did those back to back. I called that one "It Takes Two to Gospel." I've done Thessalonians. Next year I'll be doing Corinthians. But I just recently preached a 9-part series on hell called "What the Hell? The 9 Sermons" instead of the 9 Circles of Hell. And I presented conditionalism and annihilation. And I had a lot of people and I didn't use Ellen White, I didn't use Adventist jargon, I went deep into the Bible. I had points of view that were unique, that actually weren't stuff that I got from anywhere in Adventism. And I've had pastors from other churches go, actually, I never thought this was within acceptable Christianity, but now I'm not only do I see this as being part of, acceptable within the acceptable spectrum of what you can believe, but I'm actually convinced by some of what you're saying. So it was a very interesting experience to do that. I've got another series coming up in November called Tiptoe Through the Tulip. I'm going to be looking at Calvinism. Tulip is the acronym for the 5 points of Calvinism. And I've done things like Michael the Archangel and looking at that. And I always do it from a wider Christian perspective. So when I presented on hell, I said, here are all of the people from across all these denominations that have been conditionalists or annihilationists or believed in soul sleep. And people go, oh, wow, there's Anglicans there, there's Lutherans, there's Methodists, there's Pentecostals. Okay, I'm going to give this a look. And I did the same thing with the Michael the Archangel. I'm like, here's all the people like John Calvin and Martin Luther who believed that Michael was Jesus. And here's the reason that they did. Here's what the biblical evidence is. And so I'm not presenting something that's sectarian. I'm presenting something that is, within the safe Christian spectrum, but allowing for people to explore these ideas. I think Adventism is so caught up in its remnantness that they've forgotten how to speak to anyone other than themselves. And I think the best training I ever had for my pastoral role was when I drove Uber for about 3 years, when I talked to real people, real humans, not the Adventist robots, because you realize that they don't understand someone comes into our church and starts talking the 3 angels messages. I'm like, I go to them and I say to them, hey, you do know no one knows what you're talking about. You have to be a little bit clearer and say, the messages of the 3 angels in Revelation 14, you have to explain it. You can't just use jargon and spirit of prophecy. Well, go to a Pentecostal church. They think everyone's can have the spirit of prophecy. And in fact, I've seen prophecy. I've been prophesied over, and I've seen it work. It's not just an ancient thing that happened to some old lady over 100 years ago. There is prophecy available now. The gifts. Adventists are not cessationists in theory, but in practice, they are basically cessationists because they're like only the apostolic era plus Ellen White. And I'm like, well, we can tap into that. The Holy Spirit has gifts for you right now. And so I'm an evangelical, Protestant Christian, but I can step into either the liturgical side of Christianity or the Pentecostal side and see the benefits from that. Case in point, I saw someone mention something about the Catholic Mass before. I went to my vice chair of the Board of Council of Churches is a Catholic pastor, a female Catholic pastor. I didn't even know that Catholics had female pastors. How progressive. But she's a female Catholic pastor. She's a good friend of mine, and she invited me into a family mass one day. Now, I didn't partake of it. I wouldn't have even been allowed to if I wanted to, but I didn't want to. I don't agree with a lot of what they teach in mass. However, I went because I support relationship building. So I went there. I didn't sing any of the Marian hymns, but I sang the ones that had words that I agreed with and joined in with what I could. She asked me again just before Christmas last year and said, I know you've got these costumes, because I've got these costumes like for Christmas. Can you wear a shepherd one and lead the children up the front for the mass and put the crook on the wall? And I said, of course I will. I've got no problem doing that. Now, most Adventists, in the church would probably think this is so heretical. Why would Brendan even do that? But I built relationships through that. And now every time I'm around her, no matter who she's talking to, she tells that story. Brendan's a pastor from Border Church. He came and did this thing. I'm like, well, what are we missing out on? I just had an Anglican come and do Anglican-style communion a couple of weeks ago at Border Church because he did a great job at a pastor's retreat, and he explained, what absolution is. And I think absolution, the reminder that you have an assurance of salvation, is amazing. And I wanted him to share that, and he did. And so I'm not afraid of mixing with people who have different perspectives. And by doing that, they're not afraid to mix with me, who has different perspectives. And if you want people to be open to learning from you, you have to be open to learning from them. You have to model what it is to learn. And I think that we've lost that. We think that we've got all the truth and therefore we've got nothing to learn. Well, we can at least learn where people are at and why they're at that place. Anyway, that's my rant.
Yeah, no, it's not a rant. It was really good thoughts in there. Look, you probably need to get back to promoting and getting this September stuff organised. I was so lucky to get you on today because I know you're so flat out doing that.
Well, we did market. I'll just tell you the markets. I went to the markets the last 2 Sundays, so I couldn't go to a Sunday church because of that. And then I did a Thursday markets last week. I'll do another Thursday markets tomorrow. And we've already had like 30 odd registrations for this program. And when I told people, like, I haven't shied away from it. Our banner has Border Church on it, not prominently, but just there, so that people know. Because I hate the bait and switch thing with Adventism. There's a lot of bait and switch that happens. For example, the way that AYC and Arise teach door knocking, where you go and you do the survey and you knock on the door and say, I'm just filling out a survey, when you're never going to use that survey to correlate and use statistical analysis or anything. No. It's just a farce. I find it disingenuous. I find it dishonest personally. And also, coming from the world, my mum used to joke that if the Jehovah's Witnesses come to the door, she's going to get this was back before the gun buyback. She's like, I'll go and get the gun and I'm going to shoot twice. One will be a warning, but no one's going to know which one was. My mum hated the door knockers, so I've never loved door knocking. But
Love it.
at the markets, people ask, so who's running this? How are you funding this? Because it's free. We're not charging any money. The Adventist Church for some of these charges money, but we're saying it's free. Oh, who's funding this? Oh, well, we've got a charity our church runs, and we closed down our church for the whole of September so that we can run this. And not a single person, having heard that it's a church, has had a negative reaction. They all go, that's really needed. The idea that we would have the humility to close down our self-feeding to feed the community has shocked people. Just the ones that have connected, and I'm talking, there's several dozen people have all gone away going, that's needed. That's really interesting that you would do that you would close down your happy clappy worship time to be there for the community. So try it. This is a pilot program that we're running. Please pray for this, people out there, because we really would like to see this grow as an idea.
For those that do, I don't know, a lot of people that do watch the show do live in that North New South Wales, South Queensland area. Can you just remind them one more time how they can get involved this week if they want to attend, and what's your first program?
So we've got two programs. They're both running concurrently, like at the same time. And so there's Enhance Your Gut Health and Frugal Feast. They're going to both be held where we meet, which is at 169 Griffith Street at the CWA, Country Women's Association Hall in Coolangatta. So it's right opposite Twin Towns. If you know if you're from the area, you know where Twin Towns is.
Yeah.
It's opposite the roundabout, right next to the Pink Building. There's a big pink building called the Pink Hotel. And it's going to be at 10 a.m. So turn up at 10 a.m. The Frugal Feast we're going to do, that's a supermarket tour and a cooking class. And the Enhance Your Gut Health, there's a workbook and lectures that are facilitated with group activities. So please, and if you can't make it, but you know someone who's interested in learning how to cook healthy on a budget or in improving their gut health, please let us know, or let them know about this, and send me a message. I'm obviously tagged in some of this stuff, so
yes, definitely. And also, if people just type in border.church.
Well, that's not. It's not on the border.church because
okay,
it's not on that at the moment.
Okay.
It's because we're in the process of having a new website for our charity. But I didn't need to do it this. I knew that if I just did the markets, we'd get enough. And we've got quite a few.
Yeah.
We will have some open spaces if you turn up on the day, or you can just message me online.
Yeah, we can easily find you. In the comments or in the Facebook group or YouTube channel as well. Any closing thoughts, Brendan? It's been so good having a conversation with you, and thank you for taking the time.
Look, there's a lot of people out there who've been hurt by the Adventist Church. Some have been disfellowshipped, some have disfellowshipped themselves. There are bad people. Well, not there are people who do bad things in all places, and sometimes that could be you, that could be me. That do hurtful things. Let's have some grace that we all wish that people had with us towards those who have done these sort of things, and look beyond the pain to what God wants to do with that pain, and work together, serve together with people that might be of different walks, that can include Adventists, that can include non-Adventists, can include non-Christians, and see what God has for us, because there is a world out there that is hurting, and our little hurts from what happens to us within the church. They seem big to us, but there are people who are hurting much more than that, who are going through domestic violence, who've lost homes, who are losing homes, who are losing jobs. We can all serve them, and I think that's the pain that we have should be pushing us towards being service-oriented people. I'd love to work with you guys. If you want to get any hints or tips, please, again, feel free to find how you can contextualize what we're doing into your location. we would love to support and help people who are doing that. And I guess I'll just pray. Can I pray to close?
Yeah, sure. I'll just give you a bigger part of the screen.
Okay. Father, I just want to pray for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and it's, I say we a lot, and I'll say that when it comes to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, when it comes to the greater Christendom, we as a church, in a larger sense, don't always represent you perfectly. I don't always represent you perfectly, and Father, I just pray that you will let the grace that you have towards me manifest towards my brothers and sisters within the church, and that will grow, and that will be something that will show through all of the people who've been hurt, whether it's by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, whether it's by other places. Father, I pray that we may start to learn to love one another, even the difficult people amongst us, because we're difficult to someone else. And I pray that you will bring about that unity that Jesus prayed for, because we want to see the world see you. And that means that they need to see you in us as well. And the Bible says that when we have love for one another, that's when the world will know. So, Father, that love comes through in difficult ways. I pray that you will help us to learn that love. I pray for every person who has been hurt. I pray for every person who has hurt other people, that grace will reign sovereign. And I thank you for this time that we've been able to talk. I pray for Peter. I pray for his ministry. We've talked about other things in the church. I pray for Conrad Vine. I pray for all of the conversations that are happening out there, and everyone who's watched. I just pray for your grace to rest upon them and your peace to be over us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you very much, Brendan Valiant, for your time today and the stimulating conversation. And we all wish you well with your activities and with Border Church and moving forward, and really value the contribution you're making to service up in that part of the world. And I'm looking forward to having you back in, we'll aim for October 22.
And if you make a trip up here in the meantime, as I think you're hoping to at some point.
I do once a year get up that way, and I'm also hoping to come up and chat with Bob Brinsmead and bring a few friends up, and we're going to do an interview with him with proper cameras and stuff. So
look me up, because I'm in the area. So we'll catch up.
How far are you from Bob's?
Well, I mean, he's Northern Rivers, isn't he? He's
the what do they call it? Avocado land, fruit land or something.
Yeah. So he's not far. So I think I talked to Adrian, and Adrian's been watching as well. So when you're up here, it'd be great to have dinner or something.
That would
together.
We will definitely do that. That would be fantastic.
And I'll even be happy to be a fly on the wall when you go and interview Bob. I'd
come. You ask some questions. Come into the room. We'll have a panel.
I'll be a verbal fly.
Yeah, and I think Gillian Ford's going to join us too. And talking about Gillian Ford and Rose Power, I'm hoping to get on in a week or two to chat about some of their experiences with some of the stuff we were talking about today. Tomorrow, Clinton Baldwin is on the program, and I'll just quickly read the topic. The required Sabbath, a person, not a day. SDA's greatest fear. That's tomorrow at our normal starting time. And this Friday, Thursday night Pacific time, Friday for us here in Australia, Rick Dingman is going to be doing our special gospel presentation this week. This will be our third one. They're really getting amazing, I don't want to say reviews, but feedback. We're really enjoying building a bit of a community here. So those watching, join us for that, because I envisage a little bit down the track a time where we'll actually open it up to people coming in here, and we'll have the guest speaker, and we'll all be watching like a Zoom kind of conference call, like a webinar. So that's coming up soon. Next week, we've got Steve Daly, and I can't remember the other one, but lots going on here. Thank you again, Brendan. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and we look forward to seeing you all again very soon.
Thanks for having me.
It's been great, Brendan. Thank you.